Tonight, charges stayed. Jared Bacon released from jail. Serious crash. 2 people in hospital after a collision near Pouce-Coupe. And a new commander. A new police chief takes over at Fort St. John. Good evening and thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with charges being stayed for one of BC's most notorious gangsters. Jared Bacon was arrested in Fort Nelson after a shooting that sent 1 person to hospital. A man was shot in the parking lot of the Knick-Mack building on January the 29th. He was rushed to hospital to be treated for his injuries. Bacon was charged with aggravated assault. John Chase was also facing 1 count of assault in connection with the same shooting. At the time, Fort Nelson police said the shooting was targeted. Police continued their investigation, gathering new evidence. However, the BC Prosecution Service now saying the charges against Bacon and Chase were stayed after the prosecutor in the case received new information. The Crown concluded the approval standard for charges was no longer met. The service also saying that they do not disclose the reason why a stay of proceedings are issued. Back in October, CJDC-TV News broke the news that Bacon, who was once a member of the Red Scorpion and Bacon Brothers gang, was living in Fort Nelson. Back in 2012, the 41-year-old was sentenced to 14 years in prison after attempting to import 100 kilograms of cocaine. His oldest brother, Jonathan, was shot to death in a brazen daylight shooting in Kelowna in 2011, and Bacon's other brother, Jamie, pled guilty to conspiracy in the Surrey 6 massacre, where 4 gangsters were gunned down in 2007, along with 2 innocent bystanders. Now, the case against Bacon and Chase can be reopened within 1 year if new evidence warrants it. It's not clear if Bacon has moved back to Fort Nelson after being released from custody. 1 person was airlifted to hospital after a serious collision south of Pouce-Coupe. Police say a semi loaded with vehicles hit a service truck on Highway 2. It happened around 7:30 this morning south of the Wayscales. Both drivers were taken to hospital in Grand Prairie. One was taken by helicopter, the other by ambulance because the hospital in Dawson Creek was on diversion at the time. So far, no word on the extent of both men's injuries. The highway was closed all morning as there was a large amount of debris on the road, motorists having to use the old Edmonton Highway as a detour. And Mounties were searching for hours for a dog that escaped one of the vehicles after the accident. The police cannot confirm if icy road conditions were a factor in the crash. However, there's been a large number of collisions across the Peace region after warmer temperatures yesterday caused the snow to melt and then freeze again as temperatures dipped back below the freezing mark. Fort St. John has a new officer in charge of the RCMP. Jamie Moffat has taken over the job of detachment commander this week. The position has been open since former Inspector Tony Hansen left. The detachment, she will going into the 24th year of RCMP. Moffat was the former detachment commander in Tumbler Ridge. She was also the interim supervisor in Dawson Creek until a new detachment commander was hired here. Hansen left the position in January of 2024 for a position in Red Deer, and there were rumblings at Fort St. John City Hall questioning Hansen's ability to communicate with city staff and the public. And police in Fort St. John are asking for the public's help in locating a 71-year-old man who's missing. Dale Philip Hofstrand hasn't been seen since being dropped off at the Fort St. John airport back on February the 5th. He was leaving for a trip to Thailand. Since been reported missing yesterday, Dale's family now telling RCMP he's arrived safely and he was experiencing cell phone issues. However, Mounties are not removing him from the missing persons list quite yet. They're working with the family to verify the information before wrapping up their investigation. Hofstrand is being described as a Caucasian male standing 5 feet, 8 inches tall and weighs 216 pounds. He has white hair and is balding with green eyes. He also wears glasses for reading and using his phone. The Fort St. John's Committee on Housing and Emergency Shelter will present its findings as they finalize a strategy to address homelessness and its impacts on the city. The committee, formed in September of last year, is made up of councillors Trevor Boland, Sarah McDougall, and Gord Klassen. In 2023, a homeless count identified 102 people experiencing homelessness in the city. 40 of those living outside or in makeshift shelters. Of them, 37% did not have enough income to support housing, while 30% lost housing due to substance use. Another 23 were involved in a conflict with a spouse or a partner, while 20% had mental health issues. The committee says homelessness can affect anyone and is often caused by systemic barriers like financial, health, and societal changes. Housing supply, also an issue with vacancy rates dropping to 6.3% in 2024, leading to increased rental rates. The committee is seeking council approval to meet with housing, public safety, and health ministers to discuss solutions, including a co-op housing pilot. They're also asking the council to advocate to the provincial government for additional funding to address housing insecurity. Those include proceeds from civil forfeiture, cannabis, and liquor tax, along with additional casino revenues. And as we mentioned earlier, the Dawson Creek Hospital on diversion once again. Northern Health announcing the closure on social media. The emergency room on diversion from 5 this morning until 3 in the afternoon. Once again, the health authority citing staffing challenges, but not saying if it's a shortage of doctors or nurses. It's the second time this week the hospital in Dawson Creek has been put on diversion due to chronic staffing shortages here in Northeast BC. Avalanche Canada issuing a warning to Peace Region backcountry users concerning dangerous conditions. With the rise in temperatures and the increase in wind speeds, the risk of human-triggered avalanches has increased. Now, combine that with fresh snow, and Avalanche Canada is saying the risk in parts of the Peace Region is now considerable. Backcountry users are being told to avoid alpine areas. There's also a moderate risk of an avalanche in the treeline area as well. And the province announcing a new task force to tackle food security in the face of U.S. tariffs. However, it's being met with pushback by the conservative agriculture critic and Peace River North MLA Jordan Keeley. The task force will be co-chaired by the executive director of the BC Agricultural Council. It'll be made up of 15 industry leaders from across the food sector. That includes farmers, processors, retailers, and distributors. They'll all work to ensure the province has continued access to healthy and affordable food, regardless of what happens with the United States. They'll also provide targeted recommendations to government on topics related to food economy. Keeley says while the task force is a positive step, past efforts have not met the immediate needs of farmers, adding it took threats from Donald Trump for the government to follow through with supports that will add a layer of bureaucracy and red tape. In a release, the province says the committee will meet quarterly over the next 12 to 18 months. And Keeley notes the best thing the province can do right now to help farmers is to scrap April's increase to the carbon tax or get rid of it entirely. Members of the Hailsuk Nation have voted to approve an historic written constitution that's been more than 2 decades in the making. The constitution will codify a power-sharing agreement between elected leaders, hereditary chiefs, and the Women's Council. It'll provide a framework for decision-making for anyone who enters into negotiations with the First Nations, such as an industry or government. The new constitution will be ratified at a feast in Bella Bella this spring. And Donald Trump has hinted at more tariffs that could impact BC's economy. The U.S. president said he'll consider an additional 25% duty on Canadian lumber and forest products. Our province is the biggest producer of softwood lumber in the country, and Canada's forestry sector has described any tariffs as unnecessary and unwarranted. It says the United States meets about 70% of its home-building lumber needs domestically and uses Canada's lumber to fill the gap. Trump has already threatened 25% duties on all Canadian goods and 10% tariffs on Canadian energy. The additional tariffs on softwood lumber could bring the total to 55%. The plan is on pause until March the 4th. The next federal election is fast approaching, and with more ridings up for grabs than ever before, the parties have to name candidates in more constituencies than in the past. And as Rachel Aiello learned, 2 of the 3 major parties still have a lot of work to do.
This is going to be an absolutely crucial election for our country.
As the race to pick the next Liberal leader gets closer to the finish line, speculation is ramping up that the winner could call a snap election soon after, to seize on the momentum the party's seeing in the polls. With 343 seats up for grabs in the next campaign, CTV News contacted the federal parties to see how many ridings have candidates selected. As of this week, the Conservatives are leading with 234. The Liberals have 147, and the NDP are close behind with 143. While recent polling shows Conservative support slipping, Pierre Poilievre, having the political wind in his sails for the last few years, has helped him recruit.
I think it's what you're seeing is a lot of people are stepping up who kind of want to be a part of that change, and they see obviously a lot of opportunity to have a seat at the table and kind of drive that.
Since Justin Trudeau triggered a leadership race, the Liberals say they've seen an uptick in interest in running for the party. But with dozens of cabinet ministers and MPs not re-offering, they've lost some senior campaigners.
Anytime you lose an MP, there's usually an incumbency benefit that comes with that. So, the fact that there's a lot of Liberal MPs who aren't running again, that will make it more challenging in those ridings.
Jagmeet Singh's team recently urged candidates in a memo to get ready for a snap vote within weeks. Despite needing to name more candidates than they currently have, the NDP's national director said every campaign there's concerns the party won't run a full slate, and in the end, they always do.
We have approved packages for many, many more ridings that we will proceed with very quickly once we know exactly when the election is going to be.
As for the Greens, the party is still vetting its nominees. But leader Elizabeth May said this week she's not nervous about running candidates in all ridings.
We will have a full slate by the writ drop.
It's not just needing to name candidates, but ensuring you have enough time to properly vet them. And so insiders told me all parties likely have a spreadsheet of prospective nominees that they could tap in a pinch, on top of rosters of star candidates who may be waiting until closer to the election being called to confirm their bids. Rachel Aiello, CTV News, Ottawa.
And Delta Airlines is addressing rumors being spread online about the pilots of a regional jet that crashed while landing at Pearson International Airport in Toronto. The airline says its first officer was not new to the job and she had been flying since last April. The comments contrast claims online by people saying the pilot had failed training events. The airline also defended the captain of the flight, Delta saying he had not failed certain training events either and had been employed since 2007. The plane had struck the landing strip at the airport Monday, hitting the pavement, then turning sideways as it slid down the runway. All right, please do stay tuned. I'll be right back with a look at your weekend weather, but as we head to break, here's a look at today's closing market numbers.